Hello and welcome back to Litcast. In this episode we're going to be exploring the character of Eva Smith or Daisy Renton from An Inspector Calls. So, who is Eva Smith? Or Daisy Renton, depending on what point in the play you're reading. So this is the girl who suffered at the hands of the Birling family and Gerald Croft. So if we think about a summary of what happens to her, she was first sacked by Mr. Birling because she was leading a strike for better pay and was pushing for better conditions. She was then sacked from a dress shop because Sheila complained about her and felt that she was perhaps laughing at her, but also secretly was jealous of the fact that the dress looked quite good when she held it up against her. She then became Gerald Croft's mistress. She was made pregnant by Eric and then applied to a charity for help, but Mrs. Birling refused that help. So then she died by suicide by swallowing disinfectant. So let's explore this character in a bit more detail. So Eva Smith never appears on stage. We never see her. I know in some adaptations, like the BBC adaptation, which is a fantastic adaptation, Eva Smith is seen and is very much a real character. But one of the kind of key points in the play is the fact that we don't see her because she could be anyone. But the point is they did these things to people and didn't necessarily think about what they were doing. So Eva Smith never appears on stage, but the audience receives quite a lot of information about her to build up a clear picture. So she's early 20s. So you think about that idea of Sheila being Eva's foil. That stark contrast of character, so similar age. Early 20s, very pretty, with soft brown hair and big dark eyes. She's a country girl. Both of her parents are dead. She's a good worker. She's got some spirit. She's got some resourcefulness. She's very good at her job in the factory. She's a romantic girl. She's gracious when she's dropped by Gerald. And she's a principled girl. So despite her lowly status and her kind of decline into prostitution, she does not accept stolen money and she will not incriminate Eric any further. So she still has those principles and those morals. Now, it is important to note that Eva is extremely significant, but technically she's not a character within the play. And because part of the play's narrative is the fact that Eva Smith could be 6 or 7 different people or could be one person. So she's technically not a character. So ideally, if you're thinking about writing about the most sympathetic character in An Inspector Calls or talking about characters that evoke sympathy, then you need to be careful when exploring Eva Smith in that context. You can certainly explore her and certainly write about her if it warrants, if the question warrants it, but just be careful to show that distinction between the characters that are actually in the play and have speaking lines and the characters that are being spoken about, because there's a slight difference there. While the audience is able to form an impression of Eva's appearance and her character, we can't discount that possibility, like we said, that she could be several different girls. And they could have all been harmed by coming into contact with Gerald and the Birlings. Now, that doesn't make what they did any better. It's a neat story to have the same girl impacted by each of them. And it makes it more tragic, arguably. But even if it was different people, they still did those things. And that's the key difference between the younger and the older generation. Sheila and Eric feel still that sense of remorse because they still did those things. It doesn't matter whether they did them to the same person or not, they still did those things. Whereas the older generation don't see it like that. The name Eva Smith is a combination of the first woman, Eve, and the most common surname in Britain, which is Smith. That's where, the idea of a John Smith, one of the most common names in Britain at the time, hence millions and millions of John Smiths and Eva Smiths. So it signifies that Eva is this every woman figure. So she's a representative of all human beings, or indeed all human beings of the class that she represents at this time. So she remains a mystery. She never appears on stage. We don't know her real name, but the play still revolves around her. But we do know she was pretty enough. Remember that word pretty? I think I spoke about it in Sheila's episode. It's such an interesting thing to do, to track the word pretty throughout this play, and the impact that the word pretty has on characters' interactions, in particular Eva Smith. We know she was pretty enough for Mr. Birling to remember her. She's pretty enough for Sheila to be jealous of her and to attract the attention of Gerald and Eric. And what we learn about her contrasts sharply with what we see of the Birling family. Think about those morals, those principles, the graciousness that she holds herself with. We should also recognise that she worked hard, supported her fellow workers, and was kind. Although she was reduced to earning her living by picking up men in the palace bar, her honesty prevented her from considering marriage to Eric and protected him from his mistake in stealing money. So she is still protecting him. Now that could be quite interesting because Eric is quite childlike and naive. So maybe there's a little bit of that sort of maternal instinct there where she wants to protect him because he's so young and naive. Or it can be because of those morals and those principles. You could say that she stands for all of the people we meet in our everyday lives. So in particular here representing the working classes, but actually it could be anyone. It could be absolutely anyone. And this is the point, the fact that, people have struggles. And again, even Priestley shows this, doesn't he? In looking at Sheila's struggles and Eric's struggles, people can have struggles regardless of their upbringing. But obviously Eva's struggles are much more profound. So just thinking about the fact that we should just be aware of other people, their emotions. We should be aware of their circumstances, or just be sympathetic to the fact that they may have circumstances that we're not aware of. And it's this idea that Eva Smith stands for everyone, and J.B. Priestley wants to use her. Remember, all these characters are vehicles for the playwright's message. So Eva Smith is a vehicle to show how we should really think about our responsibility towards other people and doing the right things for other people, even if that's not the easiest thing or the best thing for us. So just remember that kind of the characters in general are often revealed, and this is particularly true with Eva Smith, but actually the other characters as well, are revealed just as much through others' words and actions about them as well as their own. So actually some of the most revealing things about Mr. Birling are what his children say about him rather than what he says. The stuff that he says in Act 1 tells us a lot about him, but actually as we move through the play, it's what Sheila and Eric say that tell us more about him. And the kind of person that he is. And the same with Eva Smith. Eva Smith is not a character in the sense that she doesn't appear on stage. She has no lines. And yet we know so much about her from the way that people talk about her and what they say and what they remember about her. So Eva Smith is an interesting character to explore. And if you think about some of the things that have been said, she was very pretty and looked as if she could take care of herself. She'd had a lot to say, far too much, so she had to go. Now she had to try something else. A lively, good-looking girl, country bred, and a good worker too. So there's lots there that give us an impression of what she kind of physically was like, and in terms of her personality. And then in contrast is something like when the inspector says she was here alone, friendless, almost penniless, desperate. She needed not only money but advice, sympathy, friendliness. So here we've got all her problems juxtaposed with free solutions that wouldn't mean that she's asking for the earth, that wouldn't mean she's getting a pay rise. She just wants a little bit of human kindness. And using her as a vehicle to explore that is really interesting. So she's for a character that has no lines and who doesn't appear, she's certainly a fascinating character to explore. All right, that's our few minutes looking at Eva Smith and looking at some key quotes, some key notes, and ways that we could link her to other characters, themes, and context. Thank you so much for listening. We've got episodes on all of the In Spectacles characters now, and context and summaries of each of the acts, as well as deep dives into them as well. Stay tuned for more In Spectacles content coming soon, and we'll see you in the next one. Listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. You can also find us on other social media channels, including YouTube, where you'll also find our Litcast live episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you again.